Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into a source with a title that is, well, pretty impossible to ignore. The Hidden African Eden, 5 Geographic Secrets the Vatican Doesn't Want You to Know. Yeah, it proposes a radical, and I mean radical, rethinking of some of our oldest stories. So let's just jump right in.
The whole thing kicks off with this one fundamental question, and it really sits at the heart of this entire analysis. What if the map that we've all been using, the one that places our most sacred stories smack dab in the Middle East, what if it's been wrong this whole time?
Now, to really get a grip on these pretty wild claims, we first have to establish the baseline. The story most of us were taught. The source calls this the textbook Eden, which is just the perfect name for the official story. I mean, whether it was through school or just pop culture or your faith, a certain geography for these events has been completely locked in. It's a narrative that's been taught and retold for centuries, and it's basically created a fixed map right inside all of our heads.
Okay, and this is what I find so interesting. The core metaphor the source uses to frame its entire argument. It compares the official story to a safe, edited high school textbook. You know the type. It gives you the basics, it's approved, and it definitely avoids any controversy. But then it claims there's another version, a hidden archive, kind of like a top-secret file you'd find in a dusty basement, one that tells a very, very different story.
So the obvious question is, where was this so-called hidden archive kept? Well, according to the source, the answer lies in our next section, Secrets in the Cliffs.
The source uses this really powerful, almost cinematic language to paint a picture here. It asks us to imagine these ancient monasteries in Africa, literally clinging to the side of volcanic cliffs. The argument is that it's in these super remote, almost impossible to reach places that a different set of stories were preserved. Stories the West either lost or maybe chose to forget. And this isn't just some vague idea either. The source points to specific ancient texts that form the basis of this secret archive. We're talking about texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. Now, these are works that you won't find in many Western Bibles, but they were preserved and held as sacred within the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition.
And that brings us to the heart of the matter, Section 3, Africa's Sacred Geography. This is where the source lays out its 5 key, and definitely most controversial, claims.
All right, let's get into it. The first of the 5 secrets. This one challenges our most basic assumptions about that map in our heads. So, the first secret is a direct geographical challenge to one of the most sacred sites out there, Mount Sinai. The source argues that descriptions in the Book of Jubilees place it not in the Middle East at all, but on a specific mountain right in the heart of Africa. Building on that huge geographical shift, the source then moves to the second secret, which connects a biblical miracle to African geology. Okay, so the second claim tackles the famous pillar of fire that guided the Israelites. It suggests this wasn't just a miracle, but maybe a geological event. Specifically, a volcanic eruption in Africa's Great Rift Valley. I mean, can you imagine? That phenomenon would have been a truly terrifying and awe-inspiring guide to follow. Next up is secret number 3, and this one is all about the sacred rivers of Eden. This one's about water. The source claims that the Gihon River, one of the 4 sacred rivers of Eden, has been totally misidentified. It argues that if you combine the descriptions in the Book of Enoch with modern hydrography, you can trace its true source, not to the Middle East, but deep within the African continent. The 4th secret proposes a kind of historical sleight of hand, like a cultural transfer of a major landmark. So, the 4th claim argues that the concept of Zion, or the Temple Mount, didn't actually originate in Jerusalem. The source suggests it was first associated with a specific mountain formation in Africa, and that the name and its sacredness were culturally transferred, basically copied and pasted, to the Middle East much later in history. And finally, we get to secret number 5. This is the big one. This is the claim that ties all the others together into one, well, earth-shattering conclusion. And there it is, the ultimate conclusion of the source's argument. It takes all the previous points, the mountain, the volcano, the river, and uses them to make its biggest claim yet, that the Garden of Eden, the very cradle of humanity in this story, was never in Mesopotamia. It was in Africa. Now, if these claims were true, what would be the impact? I mean, really? The source describes it in pretty dramatic terms in Section 4, the thunderclap's echo. The author doesn't see this as some simple academic debate. No, they call the revelation a seismic thunderclap, a term that's meant to convey a sudden, massive shift in our foundational understanding of history, one that just shatters beliefs we've held for millennia.
And this quote really gets to the heart of why this matters so much, according to the source. The argument is that redrawing this map does way more than just move a pin from one place to another. It challenges the historical and cultural origins that have defined Western civilization for centuries.
So, where does all of this leave us? That's a huge question, and it brings us to our final section. What's next for history?
Ultimately, the source concludes that whether you accept its claims or not, just the existence of these alternative chronicles preserved in Africa forces us to look at our oldest stories with fresh eyes. It suggests that history might not be the single, straight line, the clean textbook we all thought it was. And so we end with this question, which is really the key takeaway here. It's a pretty powerful thought to leave on. If the where of a story can fundamentally shift, how does that change the what and the why? How does it change the meaning of the story for us today? That's definitely something to think about.